Hi, everyone. My name is Wisdom Akurugu. I'm one of the facilitators for this room. I take this opportunity to welcome you to this aspect of the network exchange. I will be facilitating here with Sumit Pangi. I'm not sure, Sumit, if you want to say a word before we can proceed.
No, just thank you for everybody for joining us, and we've got a very exciting lineup of speakers. And thank you, Wisdom, for facilitating the session.
Right. So just as some ground rules, so we have actually two speakers. Each person will take about 8 minutes. So generally you will have 8 minutes, but then because we have two speakers, we'll have more time. And so after the first speaker, we go for the second speaker, and then we have general time for the Q&A session. So I would just like to encourage you, because of the time, if you can introduce yourself in the chat, and then we will go ahead to start with our first speaker. And I just want to know if we have Shimo.
I am here. Thank you very much.
Shimo is coming from the African Open Science Platform. Shimo, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me see if I can project here for you. Can you see my screen?
Yes, just put it on presentation mode.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Great, yes, proceed.
Okay, great. I'm very, very glad that you are generous with time. I was conscious that 8 minutes, in as much as is sufficient for introductions, we may lose some important information. So really, I'm excited to be here, coming in to give a presentation on efforts in the continent to build a truly Pan-African platform to connect us to engage in advanced open science in the continent across its tenets. I also wear another hat because I do engage in the DS Africa initiative through engagement in the Ilwazi project. I do sit on the Science Advisory Board for that. And I think it's an ample opportunity with this type of networking sessions to connect the networks. So quickly, in terms of the African Open Science Platform, you'll see I have listed a number of things there. All those are very, very pertinent to what we're trying to do in the continent. We're trying to make sure that you can influence the development of the requisite policies that overarch everything, as you can imagine, in the science system. The issue of infrastructure is very critical to Africa. There's a lot of African trained researchers, fully qualified scientists who've been trained worldwide, but they cannot do their science in the continent because they cannot have requisite access to infrastructure. We all know the issue of data is very critical regarding the open agenda and how we can purposefully share data to make sure that we can do more science. The issue of skills, critical to Africa as a continent. We know that Africa is very young in terms of the age average. We want to influence the development of requisite skills for doing science in the digital era in the continent. We all know that open science, in a way, in as much as it's not a new phenomenon, is also a new phenomena in terms of how we do things. So incentives to warp our approach, our entrenched way of doing things in the new dispensation is quite important. And of course, the last two elements there, collaborations and partnerships. We need this in the continent to be able to make inroads. So we were asked today to have inputs on those elements, and I'll try in my presentation to do exactly that. I don't want to dwell too much. All of you, I believe, know what open science is, but I think we need to emphasize that science must be science for transformation, and it must also impact society. So the open science agenda really premises that at the very core, we are putting society at the center of all that we do. Of course, there are various elements of it regarding open access to scientific literature, not just to your peers, but also communicating results to society. I think that's critical. And then, of course, the elephant in the room regarding this data that you all know emanates, including from public funded research. What do we do with it? I think the value proposition and the case for open science is well understood. I'm putting that slide there for the benefit of some who may be new in terms of this thinking, but you can see that it's really not alien or new thought. Good scientific practice depends on communicating evidence. If you do good science, it should be natural to you to share the evidence of your research together with your publications. And it's very clear that this type of doing work has really transformed a lot of areas. I mean, genomics, astronomy, environmental science traditionally have been very open with the data sets that they have. And of course, the value proposition also is just that if we do this, we can accelerate, obviously, scientific discovery more. A lot of good work has been done in terms of formalizing and studying this value proposition. I'm sharing that again in terms of your information. The UNESCO recommendations have been approved by all our countries, or most of our countries, including in the continent. And then there's a set of recommendations that have got implications to everyone at various levels, at the national level, at an institutional level, at an individual level as a researcher, that I think indeed will be very, very important to introspect and see going forward how much we are doing in terms of those action items. Indeed, there is a monitoring and evaluation framework in place to see how all of us are doing in terms of attaining or implementing aspects of those recommendations. The first UNESCO Open Science Outlook was launched in Geneva. We were in CERN in December as the first iteration, but there will be a sequence of every 4 years, reviews done on how countries, organizations, and everybody is doing regarding this. So really, I'm sharing this for information so that participants here can be abreast of what's happening. And bringing it home, because I think this is critical, this has to be domesticated in the continent, in our organizations, in our countries, to say, what does it mean, open science, and how do we as individual countries, individual organizations implement this vis-a-vis our mandates. A very good study was done culminating in a report in 2019 to really see what's happening in Africa in terms of the landscape across the various dimensions. The detailed report link is shared there, but there were very key things that were also uncovered during that study, including the barriers to actually doing open science in the continent. I think this is very critical because a baseline study would inform future actions. And indeed, we'll see in this presentation what ultimately culminated. But the glaring gap is exactly in some of those areas that you see. And we know that investment in Africa in research is limited, but there's no shortage of people willing to work with us, including, for example, through DSI Africa, NIH, and others, to work with us to advance elements of science in the continent. It brought us to, as a community in the continent, to develop a strategy of how we can change this dispensation. A detailed strategy that was developed through a consultative process is available online at the ASP website. That really shows a visionary, progressive, future-looking strategy with pillars that we can start implementing, especially leveraging on the capacities that we have. And it's critical that those elements that you see there, we are purposeful and pragmatic in advancing them. I've mentioned the issue of infrastructure. I think critical also is the issue of having some sort of facility, virtual or otherwise, to galvanize us around data and data science, which is why I think DS Africa is doing great work in that particular dimension. I think the issue of having projects that will allow us to tease out the interfaces between us and advanced open science, the open agenda, is critical. And those projects have to be founded or based on the needs and the challenges in the continent across different spheres, including health, agriculture, and the like. So it's very critical that we find these projects and work on them together and have impact. I do also want to mention the elements of developing the necessary networks. The platform that you are using today to connect us is very critical. It's a good network platform. So this issue of engaging a network for dialogue around open science is critical. And of course, a similar network for making sure that we advance training and skills. So really, in summary, we want this platform to convene us and coordinate the many fragmented activities and interests in the continent to make sure that we can pool the resources, pool the expertise, amplify impact, and do things together. Because sometimes, more often than not, things are fragmented, and some things that are very good do not percolate to other aspects, to other spheres of the continent. I do summarize this in this particular slide. And I think often very good work is done in the continent regarding research, but we're not showcasing it enough. And there's a misnomer that not much research can happen in the continent, but indeed it is. We do have others who have invested in some capacities. Let's share those capacities. We do have people doing things all over the continent. Let's pool those activities, those resources, and amplify impact. So really, I think that's a no-brainer. I think the value proposition that we develop is compelling, and I wanted also to share it with you so that as per the intentions of this networking platform, you can appreciate what AOSP is, our goal, who our stakeholders are, and what we intend and what we're offering to those stakeholders. I'll share this with you so that you can keep it. And of course, the benefits of partnering with AOSP. Why would you want to benefit? Why would you want to partner with AOSP? Given what we're already doing. And I think it's quite compelling, and nobody can really argue with this particular benefits. If you're a government, we are developing science policies, by all means, you may find it very useful to work with AOSP and AOSP partners in helping you develop your open science policy frameworks and maybe how to best implement them. If you're an institution, you want to attract international collaborators, the AOSP network is growing. It's connecting other network, you'll benefit from engaging with us. If you are a researcher and you want to upskill and get trained on elements, research data management and other things, you may find it very progressive to engage with AOSP. If you are a funder and a donor, you want the dollar that you invest in these research calls to go an extra mile. You want to have impact in terms of what you do. So working with AOSP can really advance your agenda. We do also have details on how AOSP delivers on this mandate, how you can work with us in partnership, because in the end, we'll have to work together to implement these areas. And of course, sustainability is always key. So really, I think this value proposition can communicate vividly what we're about. In terms of the implementation of AOSP, AOSP has got a coordinating hub. Just that, it's a coordinating hub that is based at the NRF in South Africa. AOSP is hosted in South Africa by virtue of being hosted by the government of South Africa for the duration of the period. And the coordinating hub is based at NRF. NRF is a national research facility that also hosts a very large national research infrastructures. And I think this provides very strategic inputs to the coordinating hub to be able to leverage and also provide linkages in the continent. And then in terms of the continental operationalization, AOSP has a footprint and intends to have a full footprint in the continent. We are fortunate at this stage to have 3 regional nodes. Some of the nodes are represented here in the networking session. It would be good for you to chat with some of them. In Southern Africa, we got the UbuntuNet Alliance, which is a network of NRENs in the continent. They have a very large pool of stakeholders through universities and providing services over the years. And going forward, they will also be helping us expand on the issue of open science. In East Africa, we are very, very excited to have the African Institute for Capacity Development based at Jomo Kenyatta University of Technology and Agriculture. Very, very good institute, ICAD, that has got a mandate in East Africa. And they'll be working with us to advance open science. In North Africa, we do have the National Authority for Remote Sensing. Rania is here also. They will also coordinate. We're looking forward to having future calls where we can have West Africa and Central Africa represented. Africa is a large, diverse continent. Nobody can pretend for a second that we can do what we want to do without this representation that you see there. And of course, for every region, there's alignment with science policy. It's very, very important for open science to talk to existing policies and existing programs and further existing continental and regional agenda. So really, that's the operationalist modality If we can get this right, Africa can be represented in the global stage through engagement in the global open science platforms. Because we'll be organized, you can plug in, of course, you can plug in if our structures are also covered. I think there is a blueprint of what is required to be a reasonably efficient open science platform or cloud for you to be able to get your hooks into engaging in the global platform for engaging for those collaborative projects that require all of us. If you look at climate change, you look at biodiversity, you look at epidemiology, these things are global challenge that requires to be organized. So indeed, by organizing ourselves, this West Africa, we can. The issue of data we mentioned is very critical. You recall that one of the tenets is to make data fair. An influential paper was done 10 years ago. Just 2 months ago, we met in January to discuss and reflect on the past 10 years. What has been done and what needs to be done to make data fair. ASP engages in platforms to represent African voices. And I think it's critical for us to also, as the continent, have a position on some of these things. And indeed, as communities of practice like health, also think about how you can work towards turning your data, making it fair, turning that into reality. So ASP provides linkages in these platforms to assist our stakeholders. We also influence policymaking, as I mentioned, because there's a very big gap in terms of policy in the continent. Other countries have started, but you can see largely there's a lot of work that to be done. So guidance is required, which is why we engage regional member states, regional blocs, to try to assist and engage them to position open science as a key initiative that they also need to push, in addition, obviously, and in parallel or at the same time as the already existing science and technology policies. And indeed, this is very welcome. Some progress we made in other regions for them to bring open science into the mainstream. But colleagues, what is critical is the need for projects, which is why I think projects like DSI, grateful to the NIH funding to advance this area of data science. But what we need is more of these projects. And when we do have these projects, they must have a continental footprint, or there must be an effort to make them continental. There's a lot of work happening in the continent, often is not showcased, often is also not acknowledged. So it's very, very important that I think as a continent, we organize ourselves so that those that want to engage with us find that we're organized, we're reachable. And when there is a call on a particular area, we know who to talk to, not just our small clique of friends that we've been working with for the past 20 years, but we try very hard to engage on a continental scale. Colleagues, there's a lot of opportunities in terms of advancement of cross-disciplinary areas, because some of these problems we're trying to solve are cross-disciplinary. Finally, very quickly, I want to show you some of the recent proposals where ASP reached out to the networks to try to build stronger consortia, some of which you may be aware of. You know about the ELOAS project that has been mentioned. There's also was a recent call regarding the EU-Africa partnerships regarding research infrastructures, things like biobanks. Where are the biobanks in Africa in terms of data for that? There were some proposals that we engaged in across those spheres. The issue of funding, colleagues, I think as a continent, we cannot always be carried the big ball. This is the last slide.
All right, sure.
We need to organize ourselves also continentally in terms of funding for research. Indeed, as ASP, we are trying to plug into those research funding initiatives that involve African funders. Finally, the issue of conferences. We need to have continental conferences to help us dialogue and meet like this. I'm glad to say that in 2027, Africa will be hosting IDW 2027 International Data Week. Prior to that, in 2018, was hosted here in Africa as well in Botswana. We just came from Visa Africa in Kenya, hosted by the East African Node, again advancing this dialogue. There's an upcoming conference in December, collaboration with NRF and IRD French, and the International Conference on Open Science Clouds. And hopefully going forward, colleagues will have more and more of this. Finally, if you want to engage with us, there's a slide. We need your participation across those spheres. If you're a service provider regarding computational facilities, software tools, you've got expertise in developing policy, you've got expertise in research data management, reach out to us. We are building a data science and AI institute. We want those projects I talked about. We are creating networks. So thank you very much, Chair, for your indulgence and for giving me so much latitude and making this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. That's good. Thank you very much for the presentation on your advocacy on open science. So as I indicated, we have two speakers, and we will go ahead with the second speaker. And while that is going on, I would encourage you, if you have any questions, you can post that on the chat box. And so our next speaker is Faye Booker, I hope I got the name right, who is from the Center for Translational Data Science. Gen3, please go ahead.
Good morning, everybody. Are you seeing a screen that's showing a presentation? Because it doesn't look like it's
No,
showing
I
up on
think,
my side. Never mind, I will stop that share.
yes, just put that on presentation mode.
Okay, there we go.
Excellent.
All right, good morning, everybody. My name is Faye Booker. I'm a senior scientific support analyst at the Center for Translational Data Science. And today I'm going to talk about our open source software data platform for data sharing and analysis. We call it Gen3. It's not a particularly good name, but we will work with it. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Gen3. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a data commons is and what our Gen3 capabilities are. And then I'm going to show you a demonstration of both a data commons and a data mesh, which is the ability to move over a number of data commons and bring all of that information together in one place. So Gen3 is built and maintained by the Center for Translational Data Science. We're housed at the University of Chicago. We develop and operate data platforms to support research in topics of societal interest. So for some reason, if you've never been to we're in Chicago, which is in the middle of the country. This is a nice picture of the university, and this is our staff as of a year ago, who happened to be in Chicago on a day when we all got together. So Gen3 is built around the concept of a data commons. And a data commons is an infrastructure that co-locates data storage, management, and computing infrastructure with tools used for analyzing and sharing data. So we are curating a fair data environment in just the way that the Open Data Consortium was just discussing. So we are open source. Our entire source code sits on GitHub. We provide core microservices that do things such as user authentication and authorization. So who are you and what do you have access to? We can store and manage metadata, which is both structured and unstructured. Unstructured metadata is information about how a study is collected. Structured metadata may be actual physical clinical data about subjects and cases. We also enable the ability to upload and download files, as well as move files from one location into a cloud computing resource. We mint permanent digital IDs called GUIDs, and that's uniquely identifies something over the course of its life cycle. We enable the ability, we have tools that allow you to query metadata and file data. It uses GraphQL. And we have a web-based user interface for data management, exploration, and analysis. So I said Gen3 is not a particularly unique name. If you Google Gen3, we are probably number 5 on the list. But this is the 3rd generation of this technology. We use Docker containers, and we also utilize cloud automation in the form of Kubernetes. User data access and compute resource authorization can be tailored to individuals. And as I mentioned before, structured metadata and files are assigned a unique permanent ID so that everything is easily identifiable. So I'm going to break out of presentation mode in just a second. And I'm going to show you some resources that are powered by Gen3. And then I'm going to show you a quick demo of the Medical Imaging Data and Research Center, MIDRC, and also the Biomedical Research Hub, which is a data mesh. So you should now be seeing, I hope, a window that says powered by Gen 3. Yes?
Yes.
All right. I did it correctly for a change. So we are largely based in the United States, and these are a number of repositories that we support. Many of you who do genomic research are probably familiar with the Anvil. You may also be familiar with the Cancer Research Data Commons, CRDC. But we also support Biodata Catalyst, Genomel, a major project on opioid addiction called the HEAL Initiative, as well as JCoin, which is hopefully somewhere else on the page. But we also have some international collaborations. Right now, we're particularly active with the Australian Cardiovascular Data Commons based out of Melbourne, and Genomics Aotearoa, which is based in New Zealand. We also are part of a large consortium here in the US studying pediatric cancer. And if you go to this particular page, you can click on any of these repositories and go visit them. All right, I want to show you just the sort of basic setup of any research data commons. A data commons brings together data from one or more locations, harmonizes it to a data dictionary, and makes the data searchable. It's particularly useful for identifying cohorts and determining whether there are adequate sample sizes. So this particular, every Gen 3 data commons has a dictionary, which is not always the easiest thing to view. And you can view it as a graph, which I'm sure everybody is thrilled about. You cannot see that particularly well, but you can actually click through the various nodes. You can see where it exists in the data model structure. You can actually open its properties and see what is required and what is not. It's a good way of just getting an overview of what kinds of things are available. And that underlies everything. And we harmonize data to these table properties. But the most interesting thing, in fact, is the ability to search across studies. So MIDRC is a imaging repository, so it has a variety of image formats from CAT scans to digital to MRIs, etc. So we have a number of imaging studies. You could pick the kind of modality, so what kind of images are they, the kinds of descriptions. You can pick particular ages of the patients at the time. Let me see what body part was examined in the image, and so on and so forth. And as you pick these things, you see the imaging data change. So I could say, was it a CAT scan? And I'm down to 4,000 imaging studies from 300. I could say, was it a chest with contrast? And it continues to reduce. For imaging studies, we also have a built-in ability to view those studies in a DICOM viewer. So if we click on one of these and let the internet do its fun stuff, which hopefully won't take too long, eventually we should see an image pop up. But I don't want to belabor this, so that part of the presentation isn't as sexy as it. Oh, here it comes. So these are the images that were supplied. We have worked with the submitters to strip any demographic data off of the images. So things like names, gender, sex, age are typically not available on the images themselves, but they are available in metadata. And you can just scroll through those images as you desire. It's a little slow on my end, so I'm going to go ahead and back out of this. But once you've selected a cohort, you can download a manifest. which is files that you have selected, and you can use Gen3 tools to download the data of interest. Or if you have a workspace identified, you could actually use Gen3 tools to transfer the data into that workspace. We do require you to log in for downloads. And there's a login button over here. I'm not going to show those examples, but that's how we control access. Everything in this repository happens to be open, but we still like to track who has downloaded things. And so that's the overview. We also provide additional context. So we, people that are new to Medric, we provide you with some example analyses. So these are all Jupyter notebooks that show you how to build cohorts, select cases, and do some basic analysis. So we provide you with examples to help you get up and running a little more quickly. So that's an example of a data commons. We also have sort of an overarching data mesh, and we have several of them. I will show you the Biomedical Research Hub, and let me back out of what I was doing here. There we go. So BRH, as we call it locally, brings together 567 studies, I believe, from 10 different data commons. And you can actually identify which data commons they are by clicking on this data commons button and then scrolling down to see what's available.
Fair, can I indulge you? Maybe you should be
Yeah, go
wrapping
ahead.
up.
I will finish up in 2 minutes,
All right, thanks.
hopefully less. But this is just another way of actually looking at the data. This is more like a data catalog, and you can search for terms like cardiovascular or something else. And there are little buttons here that tell you whether the data is available. So a locked lock means you don't have access to the data, but there are open ones. You could then select a data set, and if I had access to it, I'd be able to select it and actually pop it into a workspace. We're working on strategies right now to build and bring your own Nextflow workflows into workspaces. And so this is kind of an exciting time for us. So let me just pop back to my presentation. You can learn more about us at gen3.org, the Center for Translational Data Science at the University of Chicago. We host community events about every month, and we have our own YouTube channel with the videos from those events that talk about new things happening in Gen3. Our source code is on GitHub. And as always, you can look and see who's using Gen3 by visiting our Powered by Gen3 page. And that is all I have.
Thanks very much, Faye, and a big thank you to both of our presenters. At this moment, I will invite some questions, some comments from the audience now. If you have any questions or comments, please put up your hand, and then I can acknowledge you, and you make your pass your comment. Otherwise, you're also welcome to post your questions on the chat box. Sumit, do you have any comments?
No, no comments for me.
Thank you. So I'm just watching and see if there's
Maybe I
any.
can ask Faye a question.
All right, go ahead, Sumit.
Faye, so as part of Iliwazi ODSP, we also use the Gen3 technologies that you guys create. I'm just wondering, is Gen3 used anywhere else outside of the US, like in any other countries, like in Europe or in South America?
So I think I mentioned this. We have partners. It's being used in Australia and New Zealand. We also have a project starting in Taiwan. We also have had some research collaborations in Singapore. So it's out there. It's not as broadly used outside of the US as we would like. We are starting, as you just mentioned, some work with El-Wazi. We're working to set up a Gen 3 Commons with Ilifu. So we are becoming a little bit better known. I mean, I think one of the advantages is we can do both data storage controlled. We can do a lot of the back end operations that groups like Terra or Seven Bridges, some of the commonly used cloud resources, don't have. On the other hand, they do things better than we do, so they have better workflows.
Great. I think there's a question as to whether you have data, training data for diabetes mellitus.
Oh, that's a good question. There might be some on the Biodata Catalyst, BDCat. I know that GenomeL used to have some diabetes data sets, but I am not sure what its current status is. But I'm happy to take a look and see if I can find anything. It would be US-based data though, so I'm not sure if that would be as useful.
And then somebody is following up with data sets for lymphatic filariasis in endemic regions.
That I don't think we do. But here again, I would, definitely encourage you to look at our repositories and see what is available.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Let me just check if there are hands. I don't see any hand. Chiamo, will you like to say something extra that you might need to?
Yes, indeed. Just appreciating the presentation, colleagues. And indeed, you can see that there are some capacities elsewhere in the continent in terms of partnerships and relationships being made. And as I emphasized in my slide, it's very, very important to amplify the impact of these relationships that maybe individually we have with some competent capacity partners. For example, the issue of training, I think, is a critical one in the continent. If you look at some of the possibilities regarding those that do have expertise, including the presentation that has been made, I'm sure there could be low-hanging fruits regarding some generic training in around the issues that their technology, for example, look at. And I like the questions that I see on the charts. Do you have data sets for this? Do you have data sets for this? And I think this just goes back to the presentation also that we made. Where is the data in Africa about things that we want to study? Is it the case that is there, but we don't have access to it? It's not organized properly? Or is it the case that we are not collecting the data that we should be collecting? What are the issues? And I'm glad these questions are coming up in this chart. I think it gets to get us to think. And if we do have that data, where do we host it in terms of the infrastructure? And how do we motivate resourcing for this infrastructure in the continent where we can host these things? And remember, with this data, if properly curated and clean data, we can do interesting things. Everybody's talking about artificial intelligence and inferring new knowledge from the data that we have. Until we get these fundamentals right, we'll be disadvantaged in terms of exploiting what we have. So really, I'm very glad that the issue of data is coming up. The issue of the infrastructure and how that infrastructure would look like is coming up. So I think these are the $1 million questions that we can start addressing in incremental steps. And as ASP, we are very keen to work across the board with stakeholders to try to make these incremental steps. Thank you.
Right, thanks very much. So I would like to thank all of you for coming through. Our time is actually up and we need to go to the next session. And so you can contact any of our speakers via the contacts that they've shared. And I look forward to meeting you in the other rooms. Thank you all very much.